It was my brother Ethan's 22nd birthday, and there was something in the air that morning. Something I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was the way the light from the window hit the living room, casting a warm glow over the familiar, slightly cluttered furniture. Maybe it was the way my dad, John, was unusually quiet, just sitting there with his cup of coffee, looking more contemplative than usual. The tension wasn't obvious at first, but it lingered, like an invisible thread connecting us all. Ethan, on the other hand, was in his usual birthday mood, expectant, excited, a little smug. I could feel the energy radiating off of him as he practically bounced from foot to foot, just waiting to unwrap his gift. He had already been hinting at something huge, something amazing he was sure we were all going to get him. And honestly, I wasn't sure we could afford anything that would meet his high expectations. I could feel my own stomach churn at the thought, but I didn't say anything. The birthday decorations were simple, nothing over the top, just a cake on the table, some streamers thrown up hastily the night before. But it didn't seem to matter to Ethan. He was practically vibrating with excitement as he eyed the small box I handed him. The box was too small to be anything extravagant, but I kept my mouth shut. I didn't want to burst his bubble. Okay, I'm opening it, Ethan exclaimed, tearing into the paper with a speed that made me chuckle nervously. His grin grew wider as he pulled the box out, but as soon as he saw the size of it, his eyes narrowed and I could feel the shift in the room. It was like the air went a little colder, a little heavier. He opened the box slowly, his hands shaking with the kind of excitement that comes from expecting something huge. But when his eyes landed on the contents, a small envelope with a neatly folded note inside, his expression shifted. It was a moment I could feel deep in my gut. His shoulders slumped for just a second, and his face changed, like a mask falling away. "What is this?" he muttered, his voice not matching the energy he had just a moment ago. I could see his brow furrow. "A note? This isn't what I wanted." I swallowed hard, watching his fingers hover over the note before pulling it out and unfolding it. As he read it aloud, my stomach twisted into a knot. "Your gift is a job interview." The words echoed through the room, and for a moment, it felt like the world froze. My father's face didn't change. His eyes remained fixed on Ethan, and his mouth curved into that calm, almost amused smile he wore when he was about to drop some wisdom. Though at the time, it didn't feel wise at all. Ethan stared at the paper in his hands, the silence stretching longer than I could bear. "Your gift is a job interview?" Ethan repeated, his voice rising now, disbelief tinged with anger. He looked up at my dad, his face turning red. "What kind of gift is that, Dad?" "I don't need a job interview. I need something real. This is ridiculous." I could feel my palms start to sweat. My heart raced. My eyes flicked to my dad, trying to read him, trying to understand what he was thinking. But he didn't flinch. His gaze never wavered. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, cool and composed, as always. "You're lucky you even got a gift," my dad finally said, his voice steady, almost too calm for the situation. "You think the world owes you something just because it's your birthday? It doesn't work like that, son." I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to say something to Ethan, to defend him. He was my brother, after all, and I hated seeing him like this. But another part of me, some deeper, more uncomfortable part, was beginning to understand. Ethan had always expected things to come easily. He was spoiled in a way I never was. And maybe this was my dad's way of showing him that life wasn't going to hand him everything on a silver platter. But watching Ethan's face twist with frustration and anger, his eyes darting away, but I caught the flicker of guilt, was harder than I expected. It hurt in a way that I couldn't explain. Why did his words hurt so much? Was I not enough? Was my gift, the small thing I thought would mean something, somehow not enough for him? Ethan stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I saw him storm out of the room, the crumpled note still clenched tightly in his fist. My chest tightened as the room went dead silent except for the distant ticking of the clock, counting down to the moment I dreaded. And in that silence, I realized nothing would ever be the same again. It was one of those mornings where everything seemed off, but no one could put their finger on exactly why. The clock ticked slowly on the wall, its sound almost mocking in the stillness of the living room. My dad was quiet, which was strange in itself. Normally he'd be joking around, making small talk, or doing something to break the silence. But that morning, he was just sitting there, staring into his coffee cup like it held all the answers. I wanted to ask him if he was okay, but I didn't. There was this unspoken understanding that if he didn't say anything, it was best to leave him be. Then there was Ethan. He sat across from me, bouncing his leg up and down, his fingers tapping on the table, unable to contain his excitement. I could feel his anticipation from across the room. He was already starting to act like it was the best birthday ever, even though we hadn't really done anything special yet. The cake was barely touched, and the presents were all still wrapped up, but you could see the excitement in his eyes. But I wasn't as excited as he was. There was something inside of me that felt a little off. Maybe it was the way Ethan kept hinting at what he wanted for his birthday, expecting the world to just hand it to him. Maybe it was the growing frustration that I felt every time he talked about how much he deserved something great. And maybe, just maybe, it was the guilt that weighed on me. I had been saving up for months to get him something he might actually like, something that felt right for once. But I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing I got him would ever be enough. I glanced at the small box on the table in front of me. It wasn't much, really. Just a simple gift, a small gesture to show that I cared. But now that I saw Ethan eyeing it with that look of expectation, I felt my heart rate pick up. Was this really going to be enough for him? Would he be disappointed? I didn't know why I cared so much, why I was so desperate to make him happy. Maybe it was because I felt like I had to be the one to make up for all the times he felt let down. I had always been the steady one, the one who didn't expect much, but made do with what we had. Ethan, though, he was always expecting the world to come to him. The room seemed to shrink with every passing second. I could almost feel the weight of Ethan's eyes on me as he waited for me to speak, to give him some kind of assurance that his gift was going to be perfect. His voice was too loud in my ears when he broke the silence. "So, what's the big surprise, huh?" He was grinning, his excitement practically spilling out of him. But there was something almost forced in his tone, a hint of impatience that made me uncomfortable. "I know you've got something good, right?" I didn't know how to respond. The truth was, I didn't have anything huge planned. It wasn't like I could pull off some extravagant surprise. We weren't rich, and birthdays in our family were never grand affairs. Still, I wanted it to be enough for him. I wanted to make him happy, to show him that I was trying, even if it didn't always feel like enough. I pushed the box toward him, the air between us heavy with the anticipation of the moment. It felt like the clock had stopped ticking. I could feel my pulse in my neck, the heat rising in my cheeks as I watched Ethan's hands tremble slightly as he reached for the box. His fingers brushed over the wrapping paper, tearing it open in one swift motion. I tried to tell myself that it didn't matter. This wasn't about impressing him. It was about showing him that I cared. But I still couldn't help feeling like he was expecting something bigger, something better. And as the wrapping paper fell away, I caught a glimpse of Ethan's face. The excitement was still there, but there was also a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Maybe it was just my imagination, but I could feel the room getting colder, like the temperature had dropped several degrees in an instant. The gift was just a simple box. It wasn't anything crazy. Yet I could already tell. He wasn't thrilled. He opened the box slowly, and that's when I felt it. The tension hanging in the air, thick and suffocating. It was one of those moments where everything seemed to move in slow motion, and I realized with a sickening twist in my stomach. This wasn't going to go the way I had hoped. Ethan's eyes flicked down at the contents of the box. For a moment, I could have sworn he looked disappointed. And it wasn't because of the gift itself. It was something deeper. Something unspoken. My chest tightened as I waited for him to say something. Anything to break the silence. But instead, he simply stared. The words that followed were like a punch to the gut. This isn't what I wanted. I could feel the room closing in on me as Ethan's words hung in the air. This isn't what I wanted. The silence that followed was deafening. I swallowed hard, trying to swallow the lump that had suddenly formed in my throat. It was like everything around me had come to a screeching halt. His voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp. It cut through the quiet of the room with a precision I hadn't expected. And it hurt, more than I cared to admit. I watched his face as he stared down at the note in his hands, his brow furrowing deeper with each passing second. His eyes flickered to me, then to my dad, then back to the note. His fingers gripped it tighter, almost like he wanted to tear it in half. My heart started pounding in my chest. Why was I feeling this way? Why did his disappointment sting so badly? I didn't deserve to feel this way. It wasn't my fault. I had tried, hadn't I? I'd spent weeks trying to figure out what would make him happy. I had searched for the perfect gift, something that I thought might show him I cared, that I'd put thought into it. But now, looking at his face, it felt like I had failed him. His lips were pressed together in frustration, and his hands were shaking as he crumpled the note slightly in his fist. My stomach turned. What was he thinking? Did he think I had chosen this gift on purpose to disappoint him? Ethan was never one to hide his emotions. When he was upset, it was written all over his face. He didn't have to say anything for me to know exactly how he was feeling. And right now he was angry. He was beyond angry. He was disappointed, not just in the gift, but in everything around him, and maybe even in himself. But instead of saying anything about how he truly felt, he just let his frustration build up. I mean, seriously, he muttered, his voice starting to rise. A job interview? What kind of gift is that? I don't need some stupid interview. I need a real gift, something I can use, something that actually means something. I could feel my hands start to tremble, the tension in the room thickening with each word he said. His eyes were starting to burn with anger, but underneath it, there was something else. Something that caught me off guard. There was fear there, too. A deep, unspoken fear that he didn't want to acknowledge. And in that moment, it hit me. Ethan was scared. This wasn't just about the gift. This was about the reality of what he was facing, the future he didn't feel ready for. And the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Ethan had always been the one to coast by, the one who expected everything to fall into his lap. But the world didn't work like that. No one was going to hand him the things he wanted just because it was his birthday. Life wasn't that simple. I glanced over at my dad, John. He hadn't said a word since Ethan opened the gift, but his eyes were steady. Calm. Watching. Waiting. He hadn't flinched when Ethan reacted. His face was unreadable, like a stone wall, and I could feel that familiar mix of admiration and frustration swirling inside me. My dad was always like this. Quiet, distant, but somehow always right when it mattered most. And right now, I could tell he wasn't about to back down. Not now. Ethan was still pacing, his hands clenched into fists, his frustration bubbling over. "This is ridiculous," he spat, barely looking at either of us. "You don't get it, do you? You just don't understand. I don't want some job interview. I don't even know if I want a job. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life. And you—" He paused for a second, his voice cracking slightly. He let out a shaky breath, the anger beginning to lose its edge. "You're all just forcing this on me, like I have to figure everything out right now." The words hit me like a wave, and I realized with a sinking feeling that he was right in some ways. Ethan wasn't ready. He wasn't ready for the real world, for responsibility, for adulthood. He had been sheltered, protected for so long, and now it was all crashing down on him in the form of a birthday gift. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the words got stuck in my throat. How could I explain that this wasn't about punishing him, that this was about forcing him to face reality? How could I tell him that sometimes the things we don't want are the very things we need? Before I could say anything, my dad finally spoke, his voice low and steady, like he was just waiting for the right moment to drop the bomb. "Ethan, you're lucky you even got a gift." The room went cold at his words. Ethan stopped pacing. His eyes snapped to my dad's face, and for the first time that morning I saw a flicker of something other than anger. It was confusion, maybe even fear. But my dad didn't back down. He just kept staring at him, unblinking. "You think you're entitled to something just because it's your birthday?" My dad continued. "You think the world owes you anything? The world doesn't care about your birthday, son. It cares about what you do next, what you choose to do when things don't go your way." Ethan's mouth opened, but no words came out. His face was flushed, but there was no defiance in his eyes anymore, just a strange mix of hurt and vulnerability. I stood there, my chest tight, unsure of what to say or how to make sense of what was happening. The tension in the room was so thick now, I could barely breathe. And as I watched Ethan's world crack open just a little more, I realized this wasn't just about a gift anymore. This was about him growing up. This was about him learning the hardest lesson of all. Life doesn't always give you what you want, and sometimes the hardest gifts are the ones you need the most. The room hung in a heavy silence after my dad's words, the tension thick and suffocating. Ethan stood frozen, his fists clenched, but there was no anger in him anymore. It was as if my dad's words had hit him like a punch to the gut, leaving him breathless, unsure of what to do next. His eyes darted around the room, but I could see the flicker of confusion and guilt behind them. It was almost as if he was seeing things for the first time, seeing the reality of his situation in a way that he hadn't before. I wanted to say something. I wanted to step in, to soften the blow, to make it easier for Ethan. I mean, he was my little brother, and I had spent my whole life protecting him from the tough stuff. But this was different. I knew my dad was right. Ethan had to hear it. He had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. "Look, Ethan," I started, my voice uncertain, but my heart racing. "I know this is hard to accept. I know it's not what you expected, but—" Ethan cut me off before I could finish. He spun around quickly, his eyes wide with frustration. "You don't get it," his voice cracked, breaking the mask of anger he'd been holding up all morning. "I don't need this. I don't need your stupid life lessons or some dumb job interview. I just wanted something to make me feel good, something to make me feel like I matter." His words hit me like a cold slap. I stood there, staring at him, unsure of what to say next. Was that all this was about? Was it really just about a birthday gift? Or was it deeper than that? Was Ethan really just trying to feel seen? to feel like he was worth something in this world that sometimes felt so indifferent. I could see the tears welling up in his eyes, but he quickly blinked them away, trying to regain some semblance of control. But it was too late. The cracks were showing, and there was no hiding them now. Ethan was scared. He didn't know how to face what was coming. He didn't know how to deal with the pressure of growing up, with the weight of the world pressing down on him. And I could see it. I could see the fear in his eyes, the fear that he wasn't enough, that maybe none of us were. I took a step toward him, my own heart heavy with the weight of the moment. "Ethan, listen to me." My voice was quieter now, trying to break through his defensive shell. "I know it's hard. I know you're scared. But this is the world. It's not going to wait for you to figure it out. And honestly, sometimes you just have to take what life gives you, even if it's not what you expected. That's how you grow." I could feel the hesitation in him, the doubt creeping in. He was torn between wanting to throw this all away and wanting to understand what my dad had been trying to teach him. But then, something shifted. I don't know if it was my words, or if it was the silence between us, but I saw it in his eyes, the flicker of realization. For the first time that morning, Ethan didn't look angry. He didn't look frustrated. He looked lost. And in that moment, I realized that maybe he didn't need an answer. Maybe he just needed time. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "I don't know what to do," he muttered, the edge of panic creeping into his voice. "I don't know if I'm ready. I don't even know if I want this." It was the first honest thing he'd said all day, and it cut through the tension like a knife. He wasn't ready. And maybe he never would be. But the question wasn't whether he was ready. It was whether he was willing to try. And that's when I saw it. The turning point. Ethan, for the first time in his life, had no choice but to face his future. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be what he wanted. But it was going to be something he needed. The job interview was just the beginning. Before I could say anything more, my dad spoke up again, his voice low but firm. "You don't have to like it, Ethan, but you do need to face it. You can't keep running from what's coming. If you want to make something of yourself, you've got to take that first step. And this is your first step." Ethan didn't respond right away. He just stood there, staring at the note in his hands, like it held the key to everything he was scared of. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. But I could also see something else. Something that gave me hope. He wasn't running anymore. He was thinking, processing. He was starting to make the choice to face the truth, even if it terrified him. I guess I have no choice," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll go to the interview. I'll try, but this isn't what I wanted." And just like that, the room shifted. The tension didn't disappear, but it lightened, just a little. It was a decision, a step forward, even if it wasn't the one we all wanted. But it was a start. And sometimes, that's all you can ask for. The next few days felt like a whirlwind. The air was still thick with uncertainty, and I could feel Ethan's internal struggle every time I looked at him. He'd agreed to go to the job interview, but I could tell that decision hadn't come easily. It wasn't just the interview itself. It was everything that came with it. Responsibility, adulthood, the idea that life wasn't going to bend to his will anymore. I remember the morning of the interview like it was yesterday. Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in his hands, looking at the clock every few minutes. He hadn't said much, but I could tell he was thinking. It was that kind of quiet, the kind where everything is being processed, but nothing is being said. My dad had already left for work by the time I came downstairs. It was just me and Ethan in the house. I stood by the doorway, watching him for a moment before I said anything. "You're really going to do this, huh?" I asked, trying to keep the tone light. My heart was in my throat, though. Part of me was proud of him for actually going through with it. But the other part, well, the other part was still worried. Ethan didn't look up at me at first. He was still staring at the coffee in his hands, his fingers lightly wrapped around the mug like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. Finally, he met my eyes, and I saw something in his gaze that wasn't there before. A flicker of resolve. Maybe it was the nerves, maybe it was the fear, but it was there. "I don't know if I'm ready," he said, his voice a little softer than usual. "I don't know if I'm ready for this whole adulting thing." He used air quotes around adulting, and I could hear the sarcasm in his tone. But there was something else there, too. Vulnerability. The same vulnerability he had tried to hide behind all that anger earlier. I nodded, understanding exactly how he felt. I had been there before. Hell, I was still there in some ways, figuring things out as I went. But life didn't wait for us to be ready. It didn't care if we felt prepared. "I get it," I said, taking a step into the kitchen and sitting down across from him. "But sometimes you just have to take that first step, even if you're scared, even if you don't feel ready. That's the only way you'll grow." For a moment, Ethan just stared at me, processing my words. And then, to my surprise, a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. It was fleeting, almost like he was embarrassed to show it, but it was there. "I guess you're right," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "Maybe this is just what I need. Maybe I do need to stop waiting for the perfect moment." I could feel my chest tighten as I realized something. Ethan was growing up. Right there, right in front of me, he was making the choice to take control of his future, to face the uncomfortable truth that adulthood wasn't optional. It wasn't something you could push off indefinitely. "I'm proud of you," I said, my voice cracking a little more than I expected. "This isn't easy, and you don't have to have it all figured out. But this is a step in the right direction." He didn't say anything more after that. He just stood up, grabbed his jacket, and walked out the door. And I watched him go, my heart swelling with something I couldn't name. Pride, maybe, or maybe relief. Ethan went to the interview. I don't know what happened in that room, but I do know that when he came home that evening, he was a little different, a little quieter, but there was a glint in his eyes that wasn't there before. He didn't talk about the interview that night, but he didn't need to. His presence, his energy, said everything. The days that followed were a mix of nervous anticipation and strange pride. Ethan went to a second interview, and then a third. Slowly I saw him start to change. Just a little. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying. He was stepping up to the plate in a way I hadn't seen before. And even though he still had a long way to go, it was the beginning of something. Something real. And as for the gift, it wasn't the job interview that changed everything. It was the lesson that came with it. The lesson that sometimes the hardest gifts are the ones we need the most. Ethan had wanted something to make him feel good, something to give him an escape from his fears. But what he got was something better. He got the chance to face those fears head on, to step into the world and take responsibility for his life. And in doing so, he became someone I didn't even recognize at first, someone stronger, more determined, and ultimately more aware of what it meant to grow up. Sometimes the world doesn't give us what we want, but it always gives us exactly what we need.